In 2024, 71% of the world's population already lives in countries where women are not having enough children to replace their populations, and that share is still rising. The global fertility rate has halved in 60 years, from roughly 5 births per woman in the 1960s to just 2.2 today. That puts the world close to the replacement threshold of 2.1, but dozens of wealthy nations are already well below it, and falling further. This is not a distant threat. It is already reshaping tax bases, pension systems, and the geopolitical balance of power between the world's largest economies. This video examines how deep the fertility decline runs, what economic damage it is already causing, what governments are actually doing about it, what more could be done, and why the window to act is closing fast. But before we get to any of that, we need to understand exactly where this decline is hitting hardest, because the countries at the sharp end of this trend are already living with consequences most people haven't fully registered. What stands out is how broad this has become. The decline isn't limited to a few rich countries, fertility has fallen across almost every region on Earth, and the long downward trend shows little sign of bottoming out. At 2.2, the world now sits right at the replacement line, the level a population needs just to hold steady, slip below it for long as most countries now have, and a population eventually begins to shrink. This inverts the alarm that dominated the 1960s and 70s when demographers warned of runaway overpopulation. The world's most pressing demographic challenge has, in the space of a generation, quietly reversed direction. To see where this trend leads at its most extreme, look at South Korea. In 1960, Korean women had 6 children each on average. By 2023, that had fallen to 0.72, less than one-third of replacement level, a collapse unmatched in recorded history. For the 24 countries with ultra-low fertility, where populations have already peaked, the probability of returning to replacement level within 30 years is just 0.1%. These trajectories, the data suggest, are effectively locked in. China illustrates what that permanence looks like at the largest scale. With a fertility rate of just 1.02 in 2025, it is on a path of population contraction without modern parallel. Current projections put China's population loss at 204 million people by 2054, the largest absolute drop of any country in history, with more than half its current population potentially gone by 2100. At the global level, world population is now projected to peak at around 10.3 billion in the mid-2080s and then begin to fall, a forecast already 700 million smaller than projections from just over a decade ago. If this were only about fewer babies, it would be manageable. The real issue is who's left working, because an economy needs enough working-age people to support its retirees through the taxes they pay. And that balance is tipping fast. A generation ago, the wealthy world had close to 5 working-age people for every retiree. Today it's nearer 3, and by 2050 it's on track for barely 2. That's a problem because pensions and healthcare were built for a world with 4 or 5 workers per retiree. Squeeze that ratio quickly enough, and the funding maths could stop working, leaving governments to fill the gap with higher taxes or more borrowing. The working-age population across the rich world is set to shrink over the coming decades, with especially steep falls in countries like South Korea, Japan, Italy, and Spain. Left unchecked, government debt across the rich world is on course to balloon. On current policies, it is projected to roughly triple within 3 decades, driven almost entirely by the rising cost of pensions and healthcare. Most of that increase comes from aging alone rather than any new spending choices, and it can only be closed through higher taxes, lower benefits, or both. Slower growth compounds the strain. Aging is projected to meaningfully reduce economic output per person by 2060. Canada illustrates how far this has already gone, with fertility at a record low of 1.33 in 2022. 98% of Canada's population growth over the following year came from net international migration, just 2% from births outpacing deaths. By 2080, the number of people aged 65 and older globally is projected to surpass the number of children under 18 for the first time in recorded human history, reversing the age structure that has underpinned economic growth for centuries. Every rich country knows the problem, so why have trillions of dollars in pro-natal spending produced almost no results? The answer reveals something uncomfortable about whether this crisis can actually be reversed. South Korea spent over $200 billion on pro-natalist policies between 2006 and 2023, baby bonuses, IVF grants, parental leave, childcare subsidies, one of the most expensive demographic experiments in history. Yet over that period, South Korea's fertility rate fell a further 25%, dropping from 1.13 to 0.72 by 2023. More spending had not produced more births. A peer-reviewed study found the core problem: over 74% of baby bonus payments went to births that would have occurred anyway, and the programme would need to be 15 times larger to meaningfully shift fertility. Hungary went further, up to 6.2% of GDP in annual family benefits, zero interest loans, housing grants, debt forgiveness, and tax exemption for mothers of 2 or more children. Hungary's fertility rate rose from 1.4 to 1.6 between 2010 and 2020, the second largest gain among 52 tracked countries that decade. That 1.6 is still well short of the 2.1 replacement rate, and since 2022, births have been falling again. Economists estimate 250 billion taels in additional annual global pro-natal spending would raise fertility by only 0.2 children per woman, a modest return at significant cost. Canada's alternative was managed immigration. Between 2016 and 2021, it admitted 1.3 million new immigrants. By 2023-24, immigration accounted for essentially all labour force growth. Recent immigrants joined the workforce at a higher rate than people born in Canada, but by 2024, housing cost pressures forced the government to cut its admission targets, which shows that immigration has a political ceiling. The third lever is extending working lives. The OECD average retirement age will rise from 64.7 for men today to 66.4 for those entering the workforce now, with Denmark, Estonia and the Netherlands already at 70 or above. The uncomfortable truth is that the most aggressive pro-natal programs in history have produced at best marginal gains, so economists are now asking whether an entirely different set of tools is needed. South Korea shows why gender inequality has a direct demographic cost. Its gender wage gap is 31%, the highest in the OECD, and nearly 20% of married Korean women leave the workforce entirely after childbirth. Research suggests Korean fertility would be markedly higher without the intense pressure and expense of academic competition, the costly race to get children into top schools and universities, which makes raising a child feel unaffordable. The lesson is that reforms to gender equality and the cost of raising children shift behaviour far more than cash payments. Immigration can expand the labour pool quickly, but a Canadian study warns it is less effective at changing a population's age balance since immigrants grow older and retire too. That makes younger, higher-skilled admissions the priority. Japan has made automation its central demographic response, channeling major investment into AI and robotics to sustain output as its workforce shrinks. Research finds AI can genuinely offset some of that labour shortfall. But the trade-off is real. Some roles become obsolete while demand for new skills rises, meaning the productivity gain only materialises alongside significant retraining investment. On pensions, the stakes are stark. Without action, that debt burden keeps climbing as the workforce shrinks, which is why keeping people in work for longer matters so much. Keeping older workers employed longer offers a partial offset. If exit rates match the best-performing OECD nations, about half of member countries could gain at least 0.2 percentage points of annual GDP per capita growth, and closing the gender employment gap fully delivers comparable benefits. But every one of these levers is working against the clock. The longer the imbalance persists, the harder it becomes to reverse, and the more deeply it locks into a country's age structure. No single measure is enough on its own, and the window to act is widely judged to be narrow, measured in years rather than decades, because today's smaller young generation is already locked in. There is now an 80% probability that global population peaks within this century, most likely between the mid-2060s and 2100. The projected peak is already 700 million smaller than expected just a decade ago, driven primarily by faster than expected fertility decline. The global median age has reached 30.9 years, up from under 30 as recently as 2021, and projections put more than half the world over the age of 40 by 2080. The 0 to 4 cohort is already 44 million smaller than the 10 to 14 cohort, a structural gap confirming the population pyramid is permanently inverting, regardless of near-term policy choices. So the real question is not whether demographic aging reshapes these economies. It is whether governments get ahead of it deliberately or absorb its cost reactively. The OECD's position is clear: the economic slowdown from aging doesn't have to happen. Countries can largely offset it by mobilising older workers, women and skilled migrants into the workforce, but only through swift policy action, not the kind of gradual reform most governments prefer. Even recovering OECD fertility rates to replacement level by 2035, the most optimistic scenario available, would have little impact on GDP per capita by 2060, because new cohorts take 20 to 25 years to reach the workforce. Fertility is not a near-term economic tool. That leaves the full economic burden for the next generation on non-fertility policies, later retirement ages, higher female participation rates, and sustained investment in productivity. Sub-Saharan Africa is the only major region above replacement, and it's projected to reach 2.2 billion by 2054, a 79% rise. Immigration will be the primary population driver in 52 countries through 2054 and 62 by 2100, including Australia, Canada, and the United States. Nations that build skills-based migration corridors between these regions stand to gain on both sides, and those that adapt earliest, combining immigration reform, later retirement, and investment in productivity, will pull sharply ahead of those that wait,